Hello, film fans. Welcome to the Film vs. Film podcast. My name is Martin Harries, your host, and I'm joined by the film encyclopedia man, Boaz Dix. We are a couple of filmmakers on occasion, but mainly can't stop yapping about movies. On this podcast, every episode we pick a topic from a film that's coming out at the cinema or on VOD. Myself and Boaz pick our favourite film from that topic, or team up against a guest and battle it out to decide which film will become the greatest film of all time. If you enjoy this podcast, please leave us a 5-star review and subscribe. Hello, welcome guys. Thank you again for downloading another one of our spoiler specials. I very much appreciate it. And this time I have a very special guest, David Ingram from the Take 97 podcast. Hello, how are you?
Hello there, Martin. I'm doing very, very well, thank you. How are you doing on this very sunny day? Or at least it is where I am.
It's a bit grey over here, mate. But yeah, I'm fine.
Oh, all good, all
I'm
good.
very well.
No, that's good to hear.
Yeah, so this spoiler special we are dedicating to Disney Pixar's Up 2. I believe that's the correct title.
Oh, do you know what? That's actually really good. I didn't see that one coming. That's very good. I do approve.
But it is very similar, isn't it? I'm like, yep, this is the old guy from Up. This
Yes.
is basically the sequel to that film.
Yes, it basically is. Yes.
Yeah. Now, of course, we are talking Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, Indiana Jones's final outing as the fedora-wearing, whip-wielding hero that we all know and love. So, David, initial reactions to this one then. What did you think?
So, yeah, honestly, I just initially, I saw like all of us, we see the trailer, we think, oh, it's one of those. It's going to be one of those. We see the trailer and we think, it looks good, but is it going to be any good at all when we finally watch it? Well, I was actually quite pleasantly surprised about how much I did like it. Because I loved the trailer and I thought, yeah, it looks good, but it probably won't be that great. It'll be another Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Easy, no problem at all. But it's watchable. It's very much, I haven't given my thoughts on this recently, but I do think that The Flash and Indiana Jones, both for me, films that I have not really heard much decent things about, not heard too much hype about, but are watchable in the long run. There's bad things about them, and there's things that definitely could be improved. The Flash, definitely most so. But with Indiana Jones, I think it's one of those things where you expect it to be bad because of the thing that came before it, which is the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. But ultimately, it's not the most action-heavy film. It's got a certain amount of set pieces. The opening's quite dragged out, I would say, in my opinion. We'll get into more detail about that later, I'm sure. But initially, I thought this could be bad, but I was kind of proven wrong. But at the same time, it doesn't, I think we were discussing this before we came on, it doesn't need to exist. It didn't need to exist, but it's here now, so we might as well just go with it. But I think it's ultimately a fun ride of adventure. If you like the original Indiana Joneses, there's a little bit of something in there for you, but at the same time, if you're more into the slightly softer side of things, that's not too hardcore Indiana Jones, that's a bit more mainstream, a little bit more in with the way things are nowadays, but still got that sort of edge that the originals had in some places, not all of them, but in some places, then I definitely think that this is one for you to watch. Ultimately, really, it is a conclusion to the franchise, and I just hope to God they don't resurrect him again, because it's ended now, it's perfect, it's fine, we don't need to do any more. But ultimately, I enjoyed it, but not as much as, say, my personal favourite, which is The Temple of Doom. But this one, it isn't at the bottom of my list then, out of the 5 films that we've seen so far. So ultimately I loved it in a lot of ways, but it's not something that I would say had to happen, or I would rush to say, that's my top 5 film.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. I think for me, it's definitely the 4th best film out of the 5.
Yeah.
And I think it's just a better ending to end Indiana Jones' story as well, compared to Indiana Jones and the annoying Crystal Skull.
I mean, there's many titles you can come up with that film. It will, Indiana Jones and the crappy skull. All sorts.
this film is directed by James Mangold for the first time and not
Yes.
Steven Spielberg going in. I was a bit worried about that. I'm like, oh God, really? Is this really going to work? Is he going to have the same flair? And I think that's kind of maybe a correct assumption as well. It doesn't have too much flair, I don't think, from James Mangold compared to Spielberg. And even with Crystal Skull, there is some flair there.
Yeah.
But here, there's a lot of, standard stuff. But I think what's interesting as well is that Harrison Ford and James Mangold were very much going into this knowing that this is a very, very much an older hero.
Yeah.
So they're not going to push out the action as hard as we're used to seeing. And I think that might have taken us both at a bit of a surprise, which I think is fair to say. So they're very much trying to keep the action very grounded and focus on character and emotion. And I think they achieve that, certainly in character and emotion for me. So that is very noticeable. I mean, you look at other Mangold films, you look at Logan, there's probably a little bit more action in that one than in this, but
yeah, I'd say so.
It's still it's a very grounded film and very clearly focused on Logan's story, and it's very much the same case here. And also with Indiana Jones, what a lot of the appeal of these films are, especially the first three, is just the crazy adventure that kind of pushes the boundaries of what can happen. To the edges of ridiculousness. You mentioned Temple of Doom is your favorite. That film definitely stretches the reality level to ridiculousness sometimes, but there's a lot of creativity. I love the bit in Temple of Doom at the start, when right at the beginning in the casino, when he's trying to escape and he chops the gong off the wall and he's running behind it while it's protecting him from machine gun fire.
Yes.
I mean, that is the most pure Indiana Jones action you're going to get.
It seriously is, yeah.
We don't have that here, I don't think. This is just,
No.
That's not really here, which surprised me a lot going in. And also, as well, like, from a different point, is that I'm surprised this took so long to be made, this fifth one, because we had the Disney acquisition of Lucasfilm in 2013. That's 10 years ago. So I feel like everyone's focus, Kathleen Kennedy's focus, was just Star Wars, Star Wars, Star Wars. And it was just kind of forgotten about Indiana Jones. And then when the original trilogy was done, they were like, oh, what about Indiana Jones? And I feel like that was a mistake as well, possibly, that we could have had a slightly... I don't know whether it will make any difference, whether he was a few years younger. With Harrison Ford, maybe he could have pushed the boat out a little bit more with the action, but...
Yeah, potentially.
I feel like it was a bit forgotten around the Star Wars period.
Yeah, I get you. I just think that really, ultimately, the way things are going with, the merger of Lucasfilm and all that stuff, it has been very much Star Wars recently, I do agree. But I do think that you've got this sense of they're trying to wrap things up with the classic characters. They did that with Han Solo in Star Wars, and also Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher. Obviously not because they chose to, but they did it with Carrie Fisher anyway because of the unfortunate circumstances of her passing. But I just feel like that's the way Lucasfilm is going now. It's trying to give you something nostalgic and fun, whilst also providing you with something new and fresh, but also at the same time, it's still something that can be recognizable as part of that series of films. But it's also, the main important thing, it's putting to bed all of the classics so that it kind of makes it harder for people to resurrect them, so to speak. I don't know whether that's their actual intention, I should say, but I do think that that's, at least from an outsider's perspective, just someone who's watching the films, and you don't look too much into the production side of things, producers and all, like the back story behind all of the production stories like that, like how it's come to be, anything that is said between George Lucas or not and Steven Spielberg or not. I feel like they are putting a lot of their characters to bed so that they can focus on some new stuff, which is good. But then at the same time, will this new stuff be as good as the other stuff, or will it just be simple rehashes of what we've already got? Which, in a way, coming back to Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, in a way, it is the film itself overall, if you were to break it down into the sum of its parts, it's a little bit of classic Indiana Jones, but not in the way we remember it. And also then obviously this new, like you say, this adapted version of Indiana. So the new part of Indy. So he's like this aged hero. He's, pretty much near past it, and he's towards the end of his journey and his youthful side of the crazy adventures that he used to have. But they tried to recreate and emulate that younger aspect of Harrison Ford's career in that role of Indiana Jones, which I thought, I don't know where we're going to go with this. Obviously, you will lead me through what you would like to discuss, but there are definitely things that I will mention later, which I have some opinions on that I thought were quite good, but also the not so good as well. But overall, I do agree with a lot of what you're saying as well, that it's this sense of we're moving forward and then, moving it on to what we're going to talk about later as well with scene breakdowns and stuff. There's definitely elements where they've tried to bring that feel of, they're trying to recover from the blow that was the Crystal Skull.
Yeah.
Which is not by no means it's not even I'm not even over exaggerating by saying that it was the worst Indiana Jones movie ever.
Oh, yeah, by quite some distance. I think the problem with Crystal Skull is the fact that they were still trying to go with this like crazy creative action scenes, but it just looked really silly and stupid.
Yeah.
And they didn't really go down the practical route half the time. It was all in studio. They didn't do location work, and it just looks really, really silly.
Yes.
The films have been on TV recently, and I would catch the beginning of Crystal Skull and, the bit in the warehouse where he's driving the Jeep and crashing through loads of crates, and there's a big explosion where the crates go into a million splinters, but the Jeep's hardly moving. It's literally turning and it's not hardly moving. I'm like, that just looks stupid. What's going on? So they're going for this kind of, the swinging monkey rubbish. It just looks daft, and they just do not go for that with this at all,
no.
Which I find interesting.
No, I agree.
And also just a little observation as well is the fact that this is not doing good at the box office at the moment.
No, as of the recording of this, it is not doing very well, which is, it's a shame, but it's also understandable. I do understand why, because you can tell, like we've said, and like I've said already, you can tell that they're going for this. It's a mixture of cash grab and trying to get the audience back on side, neither of which is working. Because at the end of the day, what was once great, it's still, you can go back and watch those films now as part of, like, I can't remember, are they on Disney Plus these days? Because obviously they are on Disney Plus. Because like you can watch them on streaming now, or any format that you choose. You can go back and watch those films, and you can appreciate them as they originally were intended. Not watching like something new that's trying to be what the old ones used to be and how good they were. But it's not doing very well at the box office, which I'm kind of sad about, because I genuinely think, personally, I will stand out there and say that I actually think this isn't a bad film. I actually like this one compared to, we slagged the Crystal Skull off to a mass amount. There are actually things I would discuss on another day, but there are things that I don't mind about the Crystal Skull, although the amount that I hate outweighs the amount that I like. But yeah, this film definitely is much better balanced for me. I do prefer like some of the characters that are in this, not just the old ones that we know and love that were in this as well, even for fleeting moments. I keep forgetting his name, but the guy from the first film with the fez, that guy, forgetting what his name is now.
Salah.
That's it. Yeah. Sorry. Obviously we get a little appearance as well. There's more spoilers to come as well, by the way, guys, because I will fully go out with this. We're not just treating this with kid gloves. Spoiler special. The cameo, I think, with Marion Crane was quite sweet as well towards the end of the film. Yeah, that was really nice. Nice way to bring it all back to the beginning of the franchise with one of the original heroines in the series that started it all. And the fact that we were led down some sort of stray path that we'd never see her again, and we just see a picture of her because they were filing for separation, filing for divorce. I just don't really, I feel like Indiana Jones always needs, like, I'm not saying he needs a love interest all the time, but I do think that he needs, something or someone to anchor him. Now, they did that in the form of Phoebe Waller-Bridge in this, but as his adventuring companion. But the thing that we love about the Indiana Jones films the most is is that strange romantic element that's buried in the middle of like all of this mass crazy adventure that goes on that surrounds Indiana and his like many explorations to put it back in a museum because that's where it belongs. But yeah, no, ultimately, this film, yeah, it did stand out for me, and I am sad that it's not doing better at the box office, but I do understand why.
Yeah, I think another aspect as well is that maybe audiences are just maybe not convinced with Harrison Ford being this old.
Yeah,
you know, how is this going to work, and just maybe the simple fact that they just don't want to see that, you know, a childhood hero look really old, you know, in this kind of thing.
Yeah,
maybe as a cash grab, I don't know, but ultimately I did enjoy this. So the opening scene, I thought for an action scene was pretty tame, really. Like nothing too thrilling. You know, when a bomb crashes through the roof and Indy has a noose around his neck and the bomb is slowly going through the floor because a mat is holding it up, that was kind of cool. Actually, that was kind of a bit Indiana Jones action, I would say.
Yeah, like an endless chasm. I quite like that. I did like that visual. That looked quite cool.
I mean, the action on the bike and the sidecar, that was cool. If not a little unclear because it was all at night. But then there's a lot of Indy just like pretending to be a Nazi, which is great, but I would prefer him to be punching them in the face more.
Thing is,
there's just a little bit of fisticuffs on the top of the train, but that's about it. Like the idea of the train's own gun taking out a load of Nazis on the train, that was cool as well.
Yeah, that was a really good visual. I think it was something that really like, it's like that classic, it was kind of almost like a metaphor, like the clock is ticking, the clock is counting down. Like, it's very nice that I don't know whether people intended this to happen, but it's quite reminiscent, you know, representative of the dial of destiny, because that's what the whole point of this is. You know, there's a lot of clocks in this going on here. You know, there's the watch that, you know, because we get lots of references to clocks and watches in this film, because we've got the dial of destiny itself, the Archimedes device. I shall refer to it as now, because Archimedes, anytime you say Archimedes, it just makes it sound 10 times cooler. But yeah, the Archimedes dial, that one. Basically, he, you know, there's that one which is at the center of the story. There's a little scene where he's like, "Give my watch back. That's that was my dad's," which is a nice little callback to, obviously, if anyone does know, you'll know who his dad is. So people might think nice and fondly of good old Sean Connery in his glory in the third film. And again,
I should have mailed it to the Marx Brothers.
Yes. and doing what I say justice to the third movie is the best, because I love even though I love Temple of Doom, Last Crusade, pitch perfect. But yeah, the beginning sequence I love. You know, so you got that, the guns going around in like a clock-like motion, like that. You know, you've got the dial, you got the watch with the reminiscence of the past. There's loads of rubbish I could read into, but no, I think the opening scene, it does have some good set pieces. But I do the one thing that I noticed, I don't know whether you noticed, and I was going to touch on it, and I mentioned it earlier. The de-aging of Harrison Ford.
Right.
We have to talk about the de-aging of Harrison Ford.
Yes.
Now, I'm not saying we have to talk about it because I think it's bad, because actually I think it's not too bad. I actually think it's quite good for the most part. It's actually okay, actually, compared to some de-aging effect faces, or even the ones where they've just recreated a face completely, like
Secret Invasion.
Yeah,
the opening titles of that.
Yes. Oh god. No, the opening titles on that, and also the Carrie Fisher face in Rogue One, which is probably the only thing I'm not the biggest fan of in Rogue One. Not the fact that Princess Leia appears, but that weird face that makes her look like a wax figure. Grand Moff Tarkin, again, that's another one. I mean, that one's okay, but it just looked very freaky. This one was very realistic. I actually thought that it actually came across really well. There was a few shots where it seemed a little bit, not fuzzy, but a little bit off then, shall we say, that like, I think it's just certain angles. And the one thing that I noticed, that there's two things that I think let the effect down the most. I don't know what it is, but for me, the hair. It's the hair that lets me down. Okay. I don't know why, but it just looks too dark. Like, it looks the darkness of it, whether it's because of the lighting, I don't know. But then again, there was scenes where he had his hair under a light, so you'd think that there'd be a bit of light and shade in the way it bounced off his hair. But it looked a little bit too clean, a little bit too perfect.
Okay, yeah, I get that.
In my opinion, like his face looked okay, but then the head looked weird. The hair looked weird. Like it didn't sit with me as how I remember him from like The Last Crusade then, which is obviously, well, it's that time period that it's based around, like Raiders of the Lost Ark come Last Crusade.
Yeah, I think Last Crusade is 38, so this is like an 8-year jump, as this is 4 years. 1944, so it's a bit of a jump, but not massive.
Yeah, see, even then, you'd think that his hair might be graying a little bit, but it looks perfect. It looks like he's got hair dye.
Yeah, there's another flashback where they de-age him, but in the 50s.
Yeah.
Where they de-age him and he's got grey hair, and I thought that looked really good.
See, that one, actually, I do agree. That I think out of the two of them, that was the best one, because I actually genuinely thought they just put makeup on him. They just, like, they did something with him. Like, you know, I looked it up, obviously, later, and I was thinking, no, that's a de-aging one. But that, that one actually looked really good when it's a flashback to him and Toby Jones before Toby Jones's character sadly leaves this mortal coil. But I just, that aging effect was better than the first one. The first one, the face was okay in certain shots. Like the shot that you see in the trailer of him where he puts his hat on, he turns around into the light and he just looks, you can just tell that they've basically got a stock image of Indiana Jones, and that's what that's based on. That's why that picture looks so perfect, because it's based on a particular shot from a film. Whereas the others look a little bit, sometimes they look like Harrison Ford in different lights. Others, they look a bit odd. And I think for me, it's the hair. And then the other thing that I would point out before I close on so I can close upon this comment, is the voice. The voice got me a lot. The voice got me because basically
it's a bit too low, isn't it?
You can tell that, you know, you've got a young looking Harrison Ford, be it de-aged, you know, doesn't matter. You listen to him, you can tell that it's Harrison Ford from now. Because
that's the problem.
It's not, that's the only problem. Like when you get an actor that sounds no different to the day that they were, you know, in their original role, if they revisit it when they're older, it's fine. When you get someone who's got that gravelly like voice, and it, you know, their voice has clearly had some change going on as they've got older, it's not convincing. And also, I think sometimes some of the, you could tell some of the movements as well. You could tell it was definitely Harrison Ford acting it out and not a body double, because there's a bit where you see him from behind running. I think it's towards like the train, I think. And walking up the hill or something. I think he's after the big fight on the train and they've got the dial.
Right.
You can just tell the posture and the way he's walking. That's not young Indiana Jones. For me, that's like, you can tell that that's Harrison now. So at least you can applaud them for actually using Harrison Ford in that scene, and not just a body double. But I can pick at it a lot, even though I said I don't mind it to start with. I can really pick at it because you can. There's certain things that just, you know, they stick out. But ultimately, it was a nice idea to do that in the beginning, I think. But in the end, the bits that I preferred were the later segments, really, for me.
Hey, I'm James Lovino, and I'm here to tell you about Alternate Sides, a movie podcast with a twist. I've worked in the film business for 2 decades, but I haven't actually seen that many movies, and this has been driving my frequent collaborator, Sam, a self-confessed film snob, crazy. So every week, while he's stuck in his car trying to avoid getting a parking ticket, thanks to New York City's alternate side parking regulations, we discuss a classic film I've finally just gotten around to seeing. Alternate Sides, a new podcast about movies, parking, and a 25-year friendship, wherever you get your podcasts.
I think, you know, it's always a very nice, like, nostalgic opening. I was expecting the action to be a bit more expansive, if you will, but you know, but that they're just working with their limitations with what Harrison Ford can do in terms of the de-aging stuff. I think there is still an element of the uncanny valley that it just doesn't look quite right.
Yeah,
you know, it's definitely one of the better ones, but it's definitely not there yet at all. Really, I think with the voice, you can definitely tell they've done work on it, but yeah, it definitely sounds older than we're used to in that time period from the original trilogy. Yes, 6 years have passed technically, but I don't think it would have gone down that much, that low. You know,
I mean, unless he decided to have a mass like like binge on cigars or whatever it is that he liked at the time
during the war.
He's taken lead from Winston Churchill on that. He's American, but he's taken lead from Winston Churchill. He's like, I will smoke the heroin, the heroes. I was going to say heroines. Then that's a different story altogether. the heroes drug, and that is cigar. So my voice will sound really gravelly.
Yeah, definitely not train spotting in this one.
No.
But I think with the movement, I wasn't too annoyed about the movement in terms of the de-aging. Yes, it's definitely very much Harrison Ford doing all this, but I think it was just directed in such a way that like you couldn't tell as much, especially on the train. So I thought that was quite clever from James Mangold in disguising that it is actually Harrison Ford and he is moving like a 40-year-old man.
Yeah.
I was convinced. The only thing that didn't convince me at all was there's that big wide shot when he gets up onto the roof of the train in silhouette.
No. Yeah.
That looked pretty bad.
No, yeah. This is the thing, right? The action bits where he's like jumping about, I do admit that was fine. The bits where he sort of, I think I'm more on about when he walked slowly. You could tell that it was an older Harrison Ford, but no, that actually, I'm glad you mentioned that because that is something that, sometimes you watch films after like a second time, or you leave and you think back and you think, oh, what was good, what was bad, what could be improved. And I remember, and not often do I say, oh, that is shit. When you sit there for the first time watching a film, you want to take it in, and usually you're like, yeah, this is great, and you don't realize it's rubbish until afterwards. Well, in this case, I sat there, saw that wide shot, thought it looked beautiful, and then there's this little weird fucking CGI guy in the middle, just like, what the hell is that? Like, you couldn't have got a body double to do that? Like, out of all the things you decided to do, like...
Thankfully, it's only the one shot.
Thank God it was.
Because I think there are more egregious examples of having like 70-year-old men pretending to be in their 40s, i.e. The Irishman.
I was going to say, I'm glad you said The Irishman. I was like, what could he possibly be referring to?
Yeah, there's action scenes in there where De Niro it just does not move like a 40-year-old man. Thankfully, I didn't see that in this.
Yes, no, I think that's the one thing you can applaud James Mangold on. He worked with what he had, and when he did alter it and change it about, he made it realistic apart from that wide shot. Because, we're never going to forgive you. You gave us Logan. You gave us a nice conclusion to Indiana Jones, but you also gave us a really shitty CGI man walking across. What I thought, honestly, even though it's probably all computer generated anyway, I thought the shot was lovely. I thought it was a nice shot. You could frame that and put it on your wall. That's a great still from the film. Until you see the little CGI man running across, like looking like an NPC in the middle of it. Like, what the hell? Like, it looked like a video game. It genuinely did. I was just like, what am I doing? Am I at the cinema or am I playing a bloody game? Like, what's going on?
I think as well, like that's the one of very few like Indiana Jones in silhouette. As we're so used to seeing that in Spielberg films. This was where like the flare doesn't really appear here. There's hardly any of those beautiful like silhouetted framed shots of Indiana Jones, and that one just being CGI is like, oh, come on. That's disappointing.
Yeah. What's weird about that? I don't know whether I imagined it, but do you remember when they first promoted this film? There was a picture of Indiana Jones. I think it's before the trailer came out. There was a picture of Indiana Jones
on a rope bridge.
Yeah, on a rope bridge in silhouette. Now, we've only just watched it, both of us, the night before we recorded this, but I'm pretty damn sure I did not see that shot anywhere in that film at all. I don't even know where it could have possibly been.
Well, I think that was just a promotional picture, maybe. But
yeah.
Also with the rope bridge in this film, it just looks so tame and so tiny compared to the one in Temple of Doom.
Oh, yeah, literally everything bowed down to Temple of Doom.
Really? He couldn't have thought of anything else? It just looks very wee.
It does.
The New York chase on the horse, I thought was fine. Nothing spectacular. I'm not sure why Indy was yelling through the parade before he got on the horse, though. Don't really understand what was going on there. But yeah, I think it was kind of cool. A cool visual of Indy on a horse riding down the subway. But yeah, it's not the best action scene in the world.
No, I mean, the trailer makes that scene look more pivotal than it actually is. Like, I'm not going to lie, like when you see that in the promotions for it, you think that's going to be like your opener, but it's not.
Right.
So like, obviously, like you see the preview clips that you would see before this, or even some of the images you'd see, you know, a lot of them would be around that, you know, that moon celebration like parade thing. And you think that that's how the film would start, but it's, or at least it would be quite close to the beginning, but it's much more integral to like the beginning of the middle then, shall we say, because the beginning is ultimately that whole flashback. Then you got the end of the beginning with like establishing Indy as this, you know, he's coming to the end of his run as a professor at the university, you know, he still believes everything should be in a museum, but he's going down, you know, he's ending it now. And really at the end of this, you know, we get to the reason we have this conflict is ultimately, I think this is my favorite way to sort of surmise why Indy decided to take Phoebe Waller-Bridge, his goddaughter's, you know, mission. Then, shall we say, you know, why he decided to take this adventure on, even though he's clearly past it. He decided to take it on purely because some idiot, some red Texan guy. I mean, he's not a Texan, but he shoots like a Texan. He's got a haircut like a Texan, I would say personally. But that weird, annoying guy. Who really is just there just to be a dick throughout this, but there you go. He's because some dickhead shot two lovely people that he liked, that he worked with. That's ultimately the basis for this film. Goddaughter turns up, tells him about thing that he encountered in the past, doesn't want to have anything to do with it, but oh no, the redneck shot his friend, so he's got to go and do it. Oh, and then there's a Nazi involved, obviously, because, you know, the Nazis are the reason why Indy, you know, lives to go on adventures, because ultimately, with the exception of...
still a Nazi?
That is my favourite line. I think, do you know what? That is my favourite, one of my favourite lines. I think it is the line of the film, really, isn't it? You're still a Nazi. Yeah. Oh, I just love it. And ultimately, Indiana Jones really has always been about Indiana Jones versus the Nazis. It's why I always find it weird that so many people, including myself, do like the Temple of Doom, because it's so different from the rest of them. Because, you know, there's always some sort of Nazi involvement in some respect throughout the majority of the series, except that one. And it's not a bad thing at all, because it's nice to break the mold, but I feel like what Temple of Doom did was what Crystal Skull tried to do and then failed massively. But hey ho, we will stick with the Dial of Destiny and the Dial of Nazis by the looks of it.
The Tangier tuk-tuk chase, that was the most impressive action scene in the film for me. And it felt like a proper Indiana Jones action scene straight out of the original trilogy. Yeah. You know, it was very intense. You know, James Mangold manages to get the camera like really close to the action too, like you're really there, you know. And I feel like there was a bit of a Last Crusade reference in there where Indy is on one vehicle trying to pull at the dial from another car, but ends up pulling Helena into the car, saving her. Yeah, a bit like the Grail at the end of the Last Crusade. Yeah, so I quite like that. That was a really quite intense scene. It definitely pushes the boundaries as well of what's believable, which I kind of like. You know, there's a bit where they're literally going full speed down these set of stairs. Yeah. You know, realistically, that's going to be tumbling because that tuk-tuk is tiny. But I kind of just like that.
And it will probably break its wheels.
Yeah. But I kind of like that they did push at least something to its limit in terms of what's believable, which we associate with Indiana Jones. So that was a great chase for me.
Yeah, I enjoyed that one as well, to be fair. I think that's the thing with Indiana Jones. You like it to be a bit cartoonish in some respect. Believable, but also cartoonish. And that's what gives it that, you know, that charm. You know, the original Spielberg, George Lucas charm with the original three is in the fact that you're clearly based in the real world. You're based around historical-based like ideas and, you know, themes and settings and such. But the fact that you've got like crazy stuff that how the hell would like Indy survive this? Like, surely he would be dead. Like, realistically, after all these years, he would be dead. But, you know, I mean,
the opening of Temple of Doom is like, really?
Honestly.
How are they not drowning and actually literally bent in half from falling off that waterfall? That's a big drop, but we go with it. It's Indiana Jones.
Such a thing. We go with it because we love it, because we think he's indestructible. Yeah. And, you know, how would he not have got his hand chopped off the amount of times in the original trilogy he went to get his hat from underneath a closing door.
Yeah. Those slow those slow closing doors do have a great deal of retractability.
Oh yes, very well, very good, well played. But yeah, no, the tuk-tuk, no, specifically, I do like. I think the reason why I think you probably, and I might agree with you, the fact that it reminds you of the original trilogy is the fact, and it sounds a bit like, like when you look at a classic example of a James Bond film. Most people say, "Oh, what does it mean to have a James Bond film? What's the key elements of a James Bond film?" Most people will say fast cars, guns and gadgets, a sharp-dressed man in a suit at some point, possibly gambling, a bit of seduction and sexual innuendo here and there, and maybe the odd, sexual encounter, and then and then the other thing is exotic locations. And if we go for Indiana Jones, you've got crazy out there adventure, some sort of plot device that's a bit out of this world, a bit crazy, but because it's linked to some historical artifact or time and place, you believe it a bit more. But with this one, it's the locations again with Indiana Jones, because and the one thing that I was really,
it looks amazing.
It does look really good.
It looks amazing.
It looks beautiful, and I do think that I can't remember. I've somewhat erased the Crystal Skull out of my mind, but I cannot remember for the life of me. Do you remember? Did they do the map thing? Because in the original trilogy and in this one,
they do. Yeah,
they do. Okay, I was going to say. I painted it so much out of my mind, I forgot they even tried. But no, that's the thing that they do with they show the 2D map, and they show the plane or the boat going across the map and showing Indy's route to these different locations. That's a hallmark of Indiana Jones film. If anything, really, because of the original trilogy being set so firmly in the 30s and the 40s, you get that lovely, even though it's not Casablanca, I do get that lovely old Hollywood feel, even though these films were made in the 70s and the 80s, and obviously these newer ones as well. I do love that feel of that travel by air, by sea, by land, and all that stuff which they used in the marketing for this one. Because I love Casablanca as an example of classic Hollywood, and it's just a real classic gem. And I do think that that's probably where a lot of the map stuff, in the traveling across the world, that's where Indiana Jones got its inspiration from, or at least part of its inspiration for that visual, showing the destination and where people were going and how they were getting there. But if you think of Indiana Jones film, you think of these cool locations, and that was just the tuk-tuk scene was just brilliant. I loved it. Wall-to-wall sunshine, brilliant cabins of all sorts of weirdness, and going through all these stairs. Only in an Indiana Jones film could you get something like that.
It's interesting you mentioned the map graphics you always have in Indiana Jones. They don't do that in this one. The first time he travels from New York to Tangier, that doesn't happen.
Yeah, it doesn't actually.
Which is quite interesting. Maybe they're well, he's not fully Indiana Jones, restored Indiana Jones yet. I don't know. Or is it just a bit of a boring thing where they're just going from New York to Tangier? It's just one stop. I mean, I don't know. But they do it when they go from Tangier to Greece, I think. That's the only time they do it.
Yeah, because you think when he got sent on his way by his good old friend,
give him hell, Indiana Jones,
give him hell,
and he nearly kills him with a car.
Do you know what? I'm sort of on the fence about that scene. I thought it was funny the way he nearly got run out. It was give him hell, Indiana. I was just yes, this is so good. Hair's on end, and then he nearly gets run over. It sort of undermined the moment.
It did a bit.
I didn't mind it.
I wasn't a fan,
but at the same time, I don't know. It's the CGI man. And those are my things that I was sat in there. John, I say I didn't mind it. I'm being a little bit too. I'm holding myself back. I'll go a little bit further. I didn't like it. I don't know. I feel like I wanted to like it, but I don't. I really don't. I really. Right. I am here for those moments, in cinema, where you get a character and you have a real heartwarming moment. You want it to be a hair on end moment. And then you just get a cheap joke like a car trying to kill it. And the man's in his 70s, for crying out loud, or whatever he's meant to be in the story. That's not funny. Fair enough if he nearly dies at the hands of some weird time demon thing or whatever.
Yeah.
in mid-adventure, that's fine. But, killing him by simply just a car,
Not by a New York taxi.
that's just like, that's degrading and just like the lowest of the low. Like, you don't kill Indiana Jones with a car. You kill him with a Jeep from World War II.
Yeah. I think that's another thing that took me by surprise in this film. It's not very funny. I was not laughing a lot in this film. Whereas you look at certainly Last Crusade and a few moments in the first two, like Last Crusade is hilarious to me.
Yeah.
Like the chemistry, I talk about it a lot in our Indiana Jones episode, which is out right now. But the chemistry between Sean Connery and Harrison Ford is just fantastic.
It is.
Whereas, I love Phoebe Waller-Bridge. I think she's perfectly cast in this film. But there's not a lot of humor there for me. I was not laughing at all, really. I know maybe that would go against kind of the tone of this particular film. That this film is very much ending his story, and it's no kind of laughing matter that a lot of his friends in this are dying. They're literally getting flat out murdered. That's no laughing matter, but still, in part of the adventure, a lot of the adventure elements in this, there aren't many jokes in those scenes, really.
No. Which is weird because, like, I feel like that's the other hallmark of an Indiana Jones film is the correctly placed humor. Like, arguably, the Indiana Jones films and the Star Wars films started the whole craze of over-the-top fantasy adventure with humor slid into tense moments way before Marvel did. Way before Marvel started doing their witty yet action-filled scenes in the MCU.
Yeah.
But ultimately, like all things that start off with that tone, it just sours and it gets a little bit like worse and dry as you go on and on.
Moving on to the underwater scene. Again, I thought this was quite disappointing, where we're told like several times that they have like 3 minutes of air in their diving suits to find like the code thing, but they to find the code tablet. They find it pretty quickly. Indy gets attacked by eels a little bit. Before you know it, Helena saves him. The scene on the boat that comes after that with Mads Mikkelsen was a lot better for me, with the whole dynamite scene. That was great. But in terms of the underwater stuff, not amazing. Wasn't particularly thrilled with that. And then you have like the tomb scene. Again, that was a bit disappointing. I understand that it's supposed to be a bit more intelligent and a bit more in line with this Archimedes in terms of maths with the water displacement. They're trying to be clever with it. But there's no like element of danger at all in that scene.
No.
Like in the original trilogy with all these tomb scenes, there's an element of extreme danger. Their lives are at risk, whereas there isn't at all, really.
Yeah, literally.
Only with that kid that's attached to like the giant American Nazi guy.
Yes,
that's about it.
Yeah, the levels of threat in this film, like, they are only existent in very few set pieces, I would argue. There's the stakes and the risks at the beginning, with the very first scene where you get, Indy and Toby Jones's character literally just, they're running on the run for Nazis like Indy always was in the original trilogy, and still is always all the way through. But there's risk there because obviously they're trying to get something, and I liked at the beginning actually how they sort of got them looking for something that ended up not being the real thing, and then you segued into, but there's this item. That's good. This item's good. And then that became that it wasn't like this is the evil object from day one. This is where we're going to go with it. And that sort of was a nice precedent in the narrative. But the risks in terms of like villainy and stuff, you get that threat of the Nazis throughout. You get it in that opening scene. But then, like you say, in like the tomb scenes, usually the most tense scenes of all, where you have confined people, like, you confined Indiana Jones into his like most cramped space where he can't escape, usually facing snakes. Although I find it weird, like you mentioned the eels, I feel like that was a bit of a cheap one, really, that they didn't actually like. I'm not saying I wanted them to go, oh my god, look, there's a snake gag there, we want them to do the snake gag. I like the fact that they didn't go too much back to the old one. So
they didn't really do the snake gag at all, did they? Did they do it? I don't think so.
No, they didn't do the snake gag, but I'm pretty sure isn't there a line? I can't remember now properly, but isn't there a line where they're like, oh, they're just like they're referring to the eels. Oh, they're just like snakes or something.
Oh,
it's
right,
very brief, so brief that
it's not amused.
Yes, not amused at all. I don't think it doesn't create that impact, and like they do it in the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, they really overdid it with the snakes. Like a literal pit of snakes. Terrible. When realistically, he'd already faced something similar in the likes of, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Temple of Doom, all of them really, but they were done freshly each time. Whereas this time, they didn't use the snake gag, which was fine, but they used eels instead. And I don't know, like it didn't seem like Indiana Jones is going to die by death by eel. Death by electric eel,
No.
I feel like, most people who know Indiana Jones well enough in the lore of his universe would think, yeah, it's not a big deal. He'll just jump out. He'll whip him. And he won't do anything because it's water.
Yeah. I feel like with the Archimedes thing where they're trying to displace the water, I kind of maybe would have wanted them... There's an element of danger that they could drown here or something like that, but it's just a nice, cool slide, really. But that's about it. It just looked fun.
Yeah, I do think before we move on to the next bit, I do think one thing I did like though, you mentioned earlier about how we should, there's not much humor in this, and there's a lot of death. So a lot of his friends are dying, getting killed off. So. There's two characters which we really only knew for 5 seconds at the beginning, that woman and that man who got shot by Redneck Johnny, as I'm going to call him now. I can't even remember his name, but Redneck Johnny. They got killed off at the beginning.
Boyd Hilbrook, I think his name is.
Yeah, that's the one. See, he's not that memorable to me. I can't remember his name. Yeah. But no, he's got the good look.
Yeah, he's in Logan, isn't he?
He's got a look, but... I'm not really fussed about who he is as a character. He sort of went in and then disappeared. He dressed up as a Nazi for the end and ultimately got his comeuppance. We'll get on to that later. But no, the thing is you mentioned about the characters dying and them basically, it's not a laughing matter that these close friends of Indy's are dying. I did like the fact that in this whole film, considering the nature of the Dial of Destiny, so the Archimedes stuff, it does involve an element of time travel. I was really worried. Every time somebody died, I thought, oh no. Particularly, I don't want to say, is it Pedro Pascal? Am I making that up?
Yes, you are. It's Antonio Banderas.
That's it. Oh. Do you know what? I said to myself when I watched it, that's Antonio Banderas. Come on the podcast. Oh my God, it's Pedro Pascal. I'm sorry, everybody.
Well, he is everywhere at the moment.
He is. I'm sorry, Antonio. I loved you as Puss in Boots, but realistically, I rarely see your face. So, apart from Spy Kids,
he didn't look like a cat in this, did he?
No, he didn't.
I didn't see any cats.
No, there was no cats, sadly. No, but anyway, I think So when he died, that was a big even though we only really got introduced to him for a short while, I got this sense of history with him. And I thought, the minute he got shot, I thought, oh no. And the minute that Indy got shot as well, I thought that was I actually don't understand how Indy didn't die, because I thought that was in his heart. But apparently it was in his shoulder. It was in his shoulder, but I thought it was his heart that they got. But I thought, oh no, here we go. Every time someone got shot, and when we found out that it was to do with time and stuff and time travel, I thought, oh, I know what's going to happen here. Indiana Jones is going to die. And then Phoebe Waller-Bridge is going to use the dial to bring him back, basically, and stop them from shooting him. And then Indy will use it to save his friend from the boat and all that. I thought that was going to happen, but I was
thankfully that did.
I was very impressed that they didn't do that, because I swear that's the default thing. You introduce a time travel device, you kill off somebody fairly likable, and then you bring them back just at the end, just for no reason at all, other than the fact that because you can.
Yeah. So obviously we'll talk now about arguably the biggest talking point in this film, and that's the whole plan of Mads Mikkelsen's character, this Nazi who's trying to get hold of Archimedes' dial. And I can't remember what it's actually called, but
it's a complicated word, which I won't try and say now because I probably will say it wrong, but I'll look it up whilst you talk. So I'll see if I can say it.
Yeah. So he's discovered the dial can find time verges. So his idea is that he wants to go through one of these time verges and go back in time, basically through a wormhole, to 1939 and kill Hitler and right the wrongs of Hitler and basically rule the world as a Nazi. And obviously Indiana Jones is like, no, you've completely forgotten about tectonic plate movement.
Yeah.
So your reading is completely off. And then they end up going back in time, not 70 years, but 2,000 years.
How they could have got that wrong, I do not know.
To the Roman Empire, and we see a lot of Roman legion ships attack Greece, and he even meets Archimedes. I mean, there's always a fantastical element in terms of Indiana Jones films. Raiders, there's the ghostly figures that come out of the Ark at the end. With Temple of Doom, was it the zombie mind control stuff and the hand going through the heart?
The culty stuff, yeah.
Last Crusade, it's immortality. Crystal Skull, it's aliens. And this one, it's literally time travel.
Literally time travel and Archimedes.
Yeah. For me, I didn't mind it. I always really like big stretches and big swings in terms of films like this, where there's a big budget blockbusters that you're not expecting. I mean, I was totally shocked. I was like, wow. I mean, going in, that they're going to go back in time. You assume they're going to go into 1939. But the fact that you see all these Roman ships in this big battle, you're like, oh my God. It does somehow fit in an Indiana Jones adventure, but it's a big stretch.
Yeah, it's a very big stretch.
For some people, it could be a bit like, what are you on about? This is ridiculous. You're going to get that from some people.
Yeah.
But for me, I felt that it fitted thematically for me. It fitted for the story because this is an Indiana Jones that, as we've mentioned already, there's literally seen two of his friends get murdered.
Yeah.
And obviously we mentioned there's a really touching scene on the boat where Indiana Jones is talking to Helena and he's saying that I tried to stop my son going to the Vietnam War. He ends up dying. And Marion basically blamed Indy for that he should have tried harder to stop him from going, and they separated. So Indiana Jones has no one. He has no one close in his life. And throughout all these Indiana Jones films, it's always about him discovering new friendships. It's about discovering family. That's the real discovery, not the actual artifact.
Yeah.
And it's very much the same here, but it's kind of in reverse a little bit. It's kind of like you have this character of Helena, his goddaughter, that's related to Basil Shaw, played by Toby Jones.
Lovely. Love that performance. So good. So much.
But there's not much affection from from Indy to Helena, because Helena has basically manipulated him right at the start to get the dial in the first place. So he's just like, what the hell is going on? What are you doing?
Yeah.
So when he goes back in time 2,000 years, he's like, yeah, I want to stay here. And I get that. I totally get that. He has nothing back in the present. Nothing in his eyes.
To be honest with you as well, it fits with his character as well, because he, at the end of the day, from day one, from Raiders of the Lost Ark all the way up to this, even through the Crystal Skull, he's an archaeologist. He's a professor of archaeology, history. He is a man of history. He is fascinated by the past.
He's always looking into the past, whereas now he doesn't need to do that. It's literally right in front of him. He can learn all this stuff. He can literally, the world's his oyster. It's just like, yeah, there's nothing for me back home. There's no family, no relatives at all. The real hero's journey in this film is Helena's. She is learning to appreciate Indy. She's learning that this guy is lost and lonely, and that's why you have this brilliant scene with Marion at the end where Helena punches Harrison in the face because he won't leave. That's the only way he's going to bring him back.
Yeah,
by punching him in the face, getting him in the other plane and going home,
which I thought was a very Indiana Jones film, wasn't it?
Yeah, and then you have that amazing last scene where they're referencing Raiders of the Lost Ark, where it actually hurts me here, pointing to the elbow, and then they do a lovely kiss at the end, and I was genuinely emotional in that point. Whereas this has clearly been a lost character, and Helena has seen that, yeah, I need to bring Marion back to sort this guy out because he's very lost. And I thought, yes, it really stretches things narratively to to bring him back 2,000 years and literally meet Archimedes. But I mean, he met Hitler in Last Crusade, so it's a similar thing there.
Some people would argue, though, that's contextually, though. That's contextual. No, you didn't actually meet Hitler through time travel, though. Some people would probably argue. No. So that's a little bit more semi-realistic. But, I mean, I think the Hitler one, when he met Hitler, that was more of a tongue-in-cheek addition, really, to be fair. He's Indiana Jones. He's a hero for the age. We can't do a film set in the World War with Nazis and not have Indiana Jones meet Hitler. I feel like that's what that was, basically. But with this one, I feel like it was very much more emotional and very thematic, as you say. Like,
do you agree with those themes?
I would say I do agree to a certain extent. So I do agree that I think that he's a very... this cements him... I don't think I disagree, actually. I'd like to maybe add on to it, to be honest with you. I feel like it's very...
Sure.
We can read into it a little bit deeper. Like, it looks... the beginning of the film, he's retiring. So he's just retiring from his job as a professor of so many years. He's not really bothered by all, like, the hoorah that's caused, as we see in that lovely little moment where he gives that lovely clock or whatever that object was to that tramp outside the university. He clearly doesn't care for that side of things. He just wants to get on with, he seems quite happy and content with his retirement.
Apart from the neighbours.
Apart from the neighbours, obviously. Oh, that scene made me laugh. That did make me laugh. But the scene, he leaves and he's retiring. And ultimately, people think, that's his mask, really. I think if you look into it, it's a mask for... I know, like, a lot of films do the whole mental-based, analysis, but I do think it's very poignant here at looking at the mental health of an older, like, individual then. Because we do a lot of films these days. A lot of films these days do the classic... I say classic like it's old, but it's not. But it's starting to become it. A trend where you get a younger person who's going through a lot of stress. It puts on a facade, and they ultimately learn that they are deeply, like, buggered in the head, and that they need to talk to someone, and all the yada yada, the usual stuff that we expect now from that kind of a story. Whereas this is a little bit different because it actually looks towards an older generation, in an older time period as well, but still very much relevant for now. Because realistically, Indiana Jones could be your granddad. He could be your dad. It could be one or the other. He is a man that seems happy and content with leaving his job at the beginning. But as we get through the film, we realize that he misses what he used to do, but he's trying to resist the urge to say yes, because he knows it'll upset him, because he knows he can't keep doing it forever, kind of thing, because he has got older. And then because when he gets sent back in, when they go back in time, and he sort of says, oh, this is my thing, this is my moment. Like, it's almost like his journey has meant something, and he finally realizes that all his stuff, like all the work that he's done, was there for a purpose. He did it for a reason, and this was the final reason. But then ultimately, he needed someone, in this case Helena, someone to tell him, look, you're not quite up yet. You've still got some unfinished business. It's almost like, I don't want to say it's a metaphor for death, but it basically is, because I feel like he was giving up on like living his life and saying, this is me. I'm happy here. There's nothing for me, as you said. But then we go to the whole getting punched in the face with, classic Indiana Jones moment there. What better way to reverse the roles than say, Indy hasn't done many punches, but let's get him punched by Phoebe Waller-Bridge of all people.
That's what the really interesting thing is about this film, is that going in, you're knowing this structure of an Indiana Jones film where the real journey is discovering family and friends and things along the way and on an adventure trying to find an artifact. Whereas you assume it's Helena, but it's not really. They don't really have a massive connection. Yes, there's a lot of like banter and stuff, but like Indy doesn't particularly like her. Like, she's selling off artifacts for a load of cash. She even says that in one line, the one thing that means the most to me is cash or something. She doesn't care about all this stuff. So there's not a lot there for Indy to like and really appreciate. Like, oh yeah, she can be we can have a stronger relationship in the future. But it's just kind of in the reverse, that Helena is seeing the good in Harrison, in Indiana Jones, than the other way around, which I find really interesting.
Yeah, I love that as well. And it really does show, really, going back to my really early statement earlier in the episode, I really do think that this should have been, I'm very much a fan of revisionist, this should have been this should have been that, because I've done it with Nightmare on Elm Street. Nightmare on Elm Street 3 should have been Nightmare on Elm Street 2. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny should have been Indiana Jones 4. Because realistically, it's what they should have done. It's what they should have done, really, because, again, I've erased it mostly from my mind, but from what I remember, Shia LaBeouf's character of his son, because it was that's his son, you kind of, I don't know, I feel like you had to be super connected. He had to be super connected to everything, whereas, Helena had that nice objective standpoint, like you say, and I think it was for the best because you ultimately got to breathe a little bit, because otherwise, if you smother Indiana Jones, your iconic hero, with brand new supporting characters and saying, "Oh, look, here's someone new to keep the audience in, and so we don't lose them on this old timer," then it won't be a true film to what the ethos of the original idea and the concept and the character would have been. So I think it was nice that she didn't take a back seat, but she took an equal footing, I'd say, but but took a step back when needed. So that's one thing I'd say about James Mangold's direction and the general way that this film has turned out. I think they got the tone and the balance of characterization and character flow correct then, because ultimately you don't want to have your hero overshadowed by Shia LaBeouf or anyone else in the film, or aliens in the last one's case. Whereas this one, I do feel like, going back to what you were saying about the whole, it's a bit of a stretch going back 2,000 years, but I think a lot of films these days are very scared to do the simple story, and people go, is that it? I will admit, I've been guilty of going, oh, was that it? I thought there'd be more, because we've got so used to complex storytelling these days that ultimately we're not going to appreciate the really good stories, which may not necessarily be the most complex ones. We're always looking for, the twists, which, M. Night Shyamalan introduced us to, and various other places have introduced us to over the years, but particularly M. Night for the blockbuster audience. We've got used to big set pieces thanks to the Avengers and stuff like that. And we're used to fast-cutting editing paces because of the likes of, even though I love them to pieces, people like Baz Luhrmann, people like, action movie directors, where it's like chop, 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 and the Fast and Furious franchise, little do I say about that. But I just think, we've gone so much against the whole slow storytelling and also, the gentle ease of narrative, rather than, just let it breathe. That's what I say. Let it breathe and don't be afraid to go down that route.
Yeah, there's definitely breathing moments here, and I think what's great about this film as well is that there aren't too many characters. I think that was one big fault for me about Crystal Skulls. There's just too many characters here. Why have we got so many side characters on his adventure? With this, it's just Phoebe Waller-Bridge. That's it, really. I think she's really great in the role. Really feisty character. You don't fully trust her at the start at all. She completely manipulates Indy. Yeah. And by the end, you kind of really like her. And I think that's a real achievement. And she has the true arc in this film for me.
Yeah.
For sure. And she handles the action scenes really well.
I think she's a very good choice. Honestly, because I only really knew her for Fleabag, I genuinely wasn't sure of what to think of the decision, really. So obviously I knew her for that dry, sarcastic comedy, and I've known that some similar genres that she's done for other things as well. And I think, didn't she voice a Star Wars droid as well? I'm pretty sure she voiced...
Yes, in Solo.
That's it.
Star Wars story.
Yeah, so again, very comedy, but I didn't know what to expect. But genuinely, she was very, like you say, very, the best emotional connection to a side character I've had, in a while. So, I totally agree with you on that.
Mads Mikkelsen... He's always great as a villain. He's in so many major franchises now. It's amazing.
Such a good man. I love that man. Yeah. That man, literally, he could be in an action version of The Room, and I'd watch it.
Yeah, he's got such a unique face, hasn't he? Just got such a villain face. If an AI decided to design a villain face, just put Mads Mikkelsen's face on it, on your character.
I mean, he's gone from Bond to Indiana Jones to Star Wars. Just like the list goes on
Marvel.
and on. So many. Like, I feel like he's got, I don't mean this in a horrible way, but he's got a great Nazi face, I have to say now. He's got a great, like, I'm not saying Mads Mikkelsen is an actual Nazi because that would be horrible.
He's definitely not.
No, from all accounts,
he's very clear.
He's a lovely man. He's a lovely man. Yeah. And I say that with no irony at all because I hear he's very lovely. But so Mads, if you're listening to us, we love you. You're great. We don't think you're a Nazi. But you do a great job of playing them though.
He's in this a lot more than I expected.
He was actually, because I didn't expect him to be in it a lot, to be fair. I thought when I saw the initial like promo for this, he was wearing, they showed the clip of him, when he goes back in time. It's right at the end of the film where he's all suited up and he's like, I'm ready to go back and kill the Führer and all that stuff. Like I thought, oh, maybe it's from the flashback sequence. Maybe and he is in the flashback sequence. But at the same time, he's very crucial to the story. And I just love the way he comes in. He's like very omnipotent, but not in the worst way possible. He's like so good. Like there's words I can't even come up with now, but I love Mads Mikkelsen. Mads Mikkelsen, you can any day just be in anything. You will always impress me.
The only thing is though, there is one film that one sequence really reminded me of, and that is Hereditary. On the train sequence, I'm like, how did his head not come clean off in that scene? I don't understand. And there is like no wound or any scars in the 60s.
I forgot about that, to be honest.
How the hell did he survive that?
Joe, you reminded me of that now. You reminded me, and now I think about it. When, again, it's the same thing. There's so many things in this film where I literally just sat there and I thought, normally I keep myself to myself and I come up with something afterwards and think, yeah, in retrospect, that was good or that was bad. No, this film got me questioning a lot straight on the spot. Like, what the hell's the CGI man doing there? Why is that voice not right? And how on earth is he not dead? Because ultimately, now I think about it, how the hell didn't he die? He literally had, what was
At
it?
At least put a scar on his face, seriously.
Like,
honest.
He would have looked really cool with a scar on his face as well. Like they missed an opportunity there. They could have had him or even a burnt face. But then again, would they say that, oh, that's too James Bond? We're not James Bond.
Maybe.
We're Indiana Jones. But I think it would have been cool. It would have been great. But literally, what was it he got whacked in the face with? Something considerably heavy, and he fell off the train. Like, how the hell is he? I mean, that's the other thing.
Definitely a big whack.
That's the other thing that I was really confused about in the beginning before they revealed what the Dial of Destiny, the Archimedes thing, which I did look up 5 seconds ago, what it was actually called. The Antikythera? That's what it's called.
Antikythera,
that's the one.
It.
I thought, before we revealed the true purpose of it and why it was there and who had it, I thought, oh, maybe he's got it. And maybe he went back in time and saved himself or something stupid like that. I thought that something happened mysterious that made him, come out with no scratches. But clearly it's just because he's so damn handsome and so damn cool that, he is invincible to everything. I am the ultimate villain. You can hit me with anything in the face and I will come back for you. I will get everything that I wanted and then still lose. But there you go.
I think the only other thing that I would slightly criticise in this story is that with Mads Mikkelsen's character is that they catch up with Indy and Helena a lot, quite a few times. It's oh, thank you very much for the dial. Thank you very much for this. That happens quite a few times in this, which did feel a tad repetitive. Whereas in the first films, that there's one scene like that, and they kind of mix it up a little bit in terms of how all the characters are chasing for the artifact. Whereas in this, it kind of happens at least 3 times.
It's very cartoony, isn't it? It's very much like we're always behind you, because I feel like you say, in the other films, you've got this sense of someone's always one step ahead, the other one's always one step behind, or if they're really close, it's because they are naturally going to be closer. But I liked the moment where before the big American parade, the moon parade, sequence, that little set piece. I like the fact that we had a bit of time where Indy didn't have a clue that he was alive and that he was still around, and he's still very much a Nazi, as he said. But I do think that it could have been, like you say, paced a bit better in that respect. They could have had a little bit more of a cat and mouse chase, really, like they did in the old ones, because ultimately you like to see one party struggling and one party sort of gaining the upper hand and maybe sort of swapping over because, maybe Indy has the dial, but they have the map, or they have the map, but they don't know how to read it. They need to get something that Indy knows, and then ultimately they come together, and then the other one gets what the other one has, and there's a bit of a to and fro. That's what would have been better, I think. So I would. That's the way I would change it if I was to, suggest an edit to this. But I do agree with you on that front, not for the sake of agreeing, but I do think it would have made it that bit better. It's not saying that I didn't enjoy it even without that, but I did think that it could have done with a little bit more of a sort of a tuck up in terms of that.
So, final thoughts then, David? Yeah, I think in the end, this is a good, realistic, and very fantastical end to one of the most beloved heroes in film history. So it's a good film to end, even though it kind of doesn't need to be here, doesn't really need to exist, but we have it. It's a nice end to Indiana Jones's story for me.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, actually, to be fair. You say it's very realistic and fantastical, but there's no aliens. No aliens.
There's no aliens,
no. Quick question. I forget. Who directed The King and the Crystal Skull? Because I can't remember. It was
Spielberg still, yeah.
Yeah, you see, you could tell he was losing his touch. You could definitely tell that he went back to some of his old projects. It's like, everyone loved E.T., right? Yeah. Indiana Jones and E.T. together, that would have been a good idea. But yeah, just to end that completely, no aliens.
Yeah. I do find it funny with Spielberg as well, that I think post that film, he was like, I'm not really interested in doing action anymore. He just hasn't really done an action film since. So, other than maybe Ready Player One, but apart from that, that's all very digital. But yeah, we'll leave it there then, people. Thank you very much, David.
You're welcome.
It's been a pleasure talking Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny with you. Yes. It's goodbye from David.
Goodbye.
And it's goodbye from me. I'm going to watch the first 3 Indiana Jones films over and over until The Dial of Destiny comes out on Blu-ray. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. See you later.
That's it for this week's pod. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. But don't stop there. Get involved and tell us what your favourite films are relating to the episodes. Send us a DM or comment on Instagram and TikTok at Film vs. Film Podcast, for Twitter at FVF_podcast. If you do, we'll give you a shout out on the next episode. If you're feeling really generous, you can buy us a one-off coffee at our Buy Me a Coffee account. Remember, please leave us a 5-star review and subscribe. Pod signing off.